On the latest Sound Politics, labor groups say general strikes or economic shutdowns are effective tools for pushing back on the Trump administration. And the idea of a general strike started a long time ago and has roots here in Seattle.
We'll talk about the 100-year-old action that popularized the idea of a general strike and how current protests in the Twin Cities and beyond are connected to that history.
That's on the latest Sound Politics, wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Meet Me Here, your weekly guide to arts and culture worth leaving your house for. I'm Jeannie Yandel. And this month, at silent reading clubs or bars, or maybe even with your own book club, you might notice folks carrying around and reading a very thick book. That's because one of the most hyped, most divisive, and literally most weighty novels of the 20th century turns 30. I'm talking about Infinite Jest, the punishingly long book by David Foster Wallace. Just as an example, the audiobook of Infinite Jest is 64 hours and 9 minutes long. When it was published in 1996, literary critics called Infinite Jest the grunge American novel, sardonic and subversive. But even though the book is from the last century, Wallace wrote some uncannily prescient stuff about our current-day need to dissociate and be distracted as much as possible. I'll talk with KUOW reporter and producer Will James. He's the first person who could tell me what David Foster Wallace was doing in this book in one sentence.
A lot of the plot of the book is about a product that's so entertaining that it kills people.
Also, Will and I make Meet Me Here co-hosts Katie Campbell and Dyer Oxley each read a chapter of Infinite Jest. We'll find out how mad they are at us and then decide once and for all, do you have to read this book? That's all coming up in a minute. But first, let me tell you about a couple of really cool events I'm headed out to. Imagine a dystopian underwater seascape where merpeople and sea creatures guide you around their kingdom, including the places where they're plotting a revolution in secret against the powerful corporation that dominates their community. This is the mermaid city of Merlantis, known to us humans as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's an interactive art installation at Basecamp Studios in Belltown in Seattle. It runs from January 30th to March 27th, and it'll include sculpture, costuming, and lots of other interactive elements. Some nights, there will even be performances from the citizens of Merlantis. The artists behind the installation are pledging to source 90% of the materials in their work from trash and recycled sources. Tickets for Merlantis are $20. And whether you're into Valentine's Day or not, it can always be fun to watch artists explore the theme of love. That's what the Bellingham Circus Guild is doing with their 16th edition of My Circus Valentine. Expect a performance full of aerial acrobatics, live music, and other fun and fantastic stuff. Shows happen in Bellingham February 12th through the 15th and the 20th through the 22nd. Tickets are on a sliding scale, starting at $25. We'll have ticket links for both of those events in our show notes. And if you want some more options for stuff to do, we've got you. Check out the weekend warm-up every Thursday around 12:45 on Soundside, or in the Meet Me Here feed every Friday.
That was cool!
Hi, it's Terry Gross, host of Fresh Air. Hey, take a break from the 24-hour news cycle with us and listen to long-form interviews with your favorite authors, actors, filmmakers, comedians, and musicians, the people making the art that nourishes us and speaks to our times. So listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.
Now, when you hear the words Infinite Jest, you may think, ugh, no thanks. Dear listener, you are not alone. The book itself is over 1,000 pages long, and it examines addiction, depression, and loneliness. There's also the author, David Foster Wallace himself. He died by suicide in 2008 after a long battle with depression. And here, I should warn you that in this episode of Meet Me Here, we will discuss suicide and sexual violence. Because after Wallace's death, several women have come forward with allegations of stalking, harassment, and abuse. Most notably, poet and memoirist Mary Karr. David Foster Wallace even said in an interview once that he partly wrote Infinite Jest to impress Mary Karr. And in 1996, when Infinite Jest came out, everybody said the book and the author were both undeniable genius. Words that in 2026 usually mean difficult and arrogant. And yet, people in Seattle are reading Infinite Jest. All the copies are checked out on Libby, the library loan ebook app. Our producer, Brandy Fullwood's book club, is reading it too. You don't have to have read Infinite Jest to talk about it or have an opinion, though. This is one of the only books I can think of that elicits strong opinions from people who haven't read a page. In many ways, over the years, not reading Infinite Jest has become a kind of badge of honor. So today, we're going to ask Meet Me Here's hosts for their take on Infinite Jest. We're going to ask them if they love it or hate it. And once and for all, we'll answer the question, do you have to read Infinite Jest? To try and get to the bottom of this question, I'm talking first with Will James. He's a producer and reporter here at KUOW. You probably know him from his wonderful podcast, Lost Patience. Will, you read Infinite Jest, and you're here to talk about it because you absolutely loved it, right?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeannie. In some ways, it's very funny that I'm here talking about this because I read this book probably 15 years ago when I was either in college or just out of college. But like, I'm the resident like straight white cis guy at KUOW who is thus like the David Foster Wallace expert. But I will say, to your question, I did read this book when I was at an impressionable time in my life, in probably my early 20s. And it was not a good reading experience. Like I distinctly remember not enjoying the experience of reading this book.
So can I ask, why then did early 20s Will James continue to read it? Like, what was on your mind with wanting to finish this book or feeling like you needed to finish the book? You could have just put it away.
I remember I discovered David Foster Wallace. I found out who he was actually through his obituary in the New York Times. That was in 2008. He died by suicide when he was, I think, 46 years old. Something about that obituary and how he was described in that obituary resonated with me. At the time I was in college, I was commuting to a state school 5 minutes from the house where I grew up. I was working in my hometown library, and something about this guy who was described as a genius and wrote this big, smart book scratched an itch in me. It felt like reading books like this is what smart people who mattered did. And that was something I needed to feel at that time. And so sometime shortly after his death, maybe a year or two later, I picked it up. And I kept reading it because even though it wasn't enjoyable, as a runner or someone who used to run a lot, there's something me and my running friends would talk about, which is called type 2 fun, which is an activity that is not fun while you're doing it, but is really fun when you think about it in retrospect. And I think that's what Infinite Jest is. And I think that's what I sensed that I was reading it, that even though it's a slog, it was something that would feel rewarding at the end.
Did it feel rewarding at the end?
It felt like surviving something really difficult. 1,000 pages, 300 footnotes. Is that right?
I believe so.
What's interesting about it is that even 15 years later, even though the book itself was not enjoyable, it hit on things, on themes that felt like they were emerging in our society, in our politics at the time, and are even more relevant 15 years later. What's astounding looking back on this book is how prescient it was in a lot of ways.
That's the experience I've been having reading this book as well, 30 years later. 1996, David Foster Wallace is sort of stunningly accurate in his description of the tension I feel, even right now, talking to you, just wanting to pull out my phone and look at TikTok.
Yeah.
That idea of being able to dissociate with a screen and not really be here and all that means, like not actually being in my life, that is the thing that kind of hooked me about this book and why I'm continuing to read it. And it almost bothers me that he pinpointed that so well, and it's still so relevant 30 years later.
Why does it bother you, you think? Like, yeah.
Because I just kind of wanted the book to only be an overblown, verbose, arrogant weight, literal weight.
Yes.
That's what I wanted. But it's, there's something else there for sure.
This conversation would be so easy if we could just dismiss him or let him be defined by his abuse, his stalking, his really bad behavior, and his kind of cringy label as like a white cis male genius, right? In a way, like you can't ignore the wisdom and the insight of the stuff he was writing about at that time. And that makes it really, really interesting and also complicated to talk about him.
Well, I want to play a little game here with Infinite Jest and with you, Will, because we kind of cast you in the role of bad guy for this episode of Meet Me Here.
Fair.
In that we asked you to assign all 3 Meet Me Here hosts 1 chapter each to read of this book.
Yes.
So Katie Campbell and Dyer Oxley are here.
Hi.
Hello.
Dyer actually has a physical copy of the book with him, but we're each going to give a little book report about the chapter that we read, and then we're going to tell you whether we're mad at you or glad with you that you made us read some of Infinite Jest. So I guess buckle up for a second, Will, because Meet Me Here host Katie Campbell is up first.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm nervous.
So Katie is like our resident book bestie. She's the founder of KUOW's book club.
Woo.
Almost everything I've read in 2025 was from a recommendation you gave me.
Oh, yay.
And we gave you the final chapter of Infinite Jest to read, chapter 74. And it centers on one of the characters of the book, a guy named Gately, who is a recovering addict. He is in the hospital, and he is trying very, very, very hard to resist taking any drugs for the pain he's in at the hospital, even though he's getting lots of pressure to do so.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so are you mad or glad that you read this?
At the end of the day, I suppose I'm glad. I can never be mad about reading. The more time we spend reading, the better, I think, at the end of the day. And I'm glad to actually have an informed opinion about this book. Am I mad about the chapter I got? That's a different question. I mean, one thing I was thinking about as I was listening to y'all talking about how huge this book was, this book that is called Genius, this writer that was called Genius. It is hard for me to get behind that, in part because, like, not for nothing, the publishing industry has for a very long time favored, a certain kind of author. White men get a lot of accolades, not necessarily undeserved in this case. But I don't think David Foster Wallace is actually that special. And I think this chapter that Will assigned me is a really great example of that. Frankly, I think self-importance that he brought to this project that made it hard for me to really appreciate or consider Genius, to be frank.
Okay, that's fair. But was there anything that moved you in this chapter? Was there anything that that stuck with you?
I'd be crazy if I said no, if I was like, no, nothing, everything's terrible. I mean, I took some notes on like lines where I was like, now you're onto something. For example, on one of the pages, the character Gately is describing, the chapter starts with him like having this hallucination of the ceiling like coming at him and swallowing him. And he's remembering this hole in the childhood house that he grew up in the roof, I believe. And there's a line that just says, origin of hole unknown. And I just wrote, cute, fine, I admit it. I like those little unpretentious moments that I think David Foster Wallace has.
Yeah.
They feel like asides. They feel kind of self-indulgent, but in a good way. And then you have lines like this. His throat felt somehow raped. And, man, it just takes a white guy of a certain age to just kind of casually throw a hard R out there. That does not impress me. And I feel like he writes in that way at times to try to be like, look at how clever I am. And when he's not trying to look so clever, that's actually when it's at its best. I also like the nightmare scene that this character Gately goes through of seeing his mother snatched away. Like that was really visceral and beautiful. Like, it's talking about addiction. He's trying to resist these drugs. He's been shot, by the way. He's recovering from an injury. He's being visited by all these people. Like, he's very stuck. And so there's like a visceralness to that of like being stuck and addicted to something and trying to escape it. It's those moments that I was like, yeah, I see what you're doing. And you didn't need 200 pages in one chapter to do it. Get out of here.
Oh my God. How long was the chapter?
It was almost 200 pages.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that.
Are you?
Oops.
Yeah, it's okay. I forgive you, Will. I do not forgive David Foster Wallace's editor or lack thereof.
I'm sorry about that. Basically, again, I haven't read the book in about 15 years. And so I kind of went off of what scenes did I still remember 15 years later. And a scene that I still remember is a central character in the book named Gately lying in a hospital bed. He's a recovering drug addict, and he is very kind of heroically trying to resist taking painkillers in the hospital. He slips into just surviving second by second, right? Moment by moment. Yeah. If I can survive the next second, then I can survive the second after that. That is a scene that stuck with me so many years later, and in so many ways, I think is one of the points of this book, that life is not something to be escaped from. It's not something to be consumed. It is something to be present for, even in the pain and the boredom and the drudgery of it, that is where life happens. And that is heroic. The act of being present for that is heroic.
I do think that came through really clearly, and that was poignant. Still, I think he could have done it in fewer pages and with a little less of that self-importance that gets on my nerves.
Oh, okay. I feel like we could just keep talking about the final chapter, but Dyer Oxley has been patiently waiting, our pop culture host, with his physical copy of Infinite Jest. So, Dyer, Will assigned you to read chapter 23. The title of the chapter is 8 November, the Year of the Depend Adult Undergarment. For those of you who haven't read the book, every chapter is named after a corporation who buys and sponsors a year in this strange new present-day future sort of world that Foster creates. Okay, Dyer, are you mad or glad that you read this chapter?
This chapter made me mad. It made me very mad. But overall, I do not believe David Foster Wallace is a good writer. I'm saying this as someone who has enjoyed reading Jack Kerouac, but holy Jack Kerouac, learn what a paragraph is. Like,
yes.
So here's the thing, and I don't care who you are, I don't care if you're some kind of British style or whatever, quotation marks are for quotes. It's in the freaking word.
Yep.
Quotation mark.
Preach,
if you're
Dyer.
using apostrophes, you're wrong. The sentences here don't seemingly end. I highlighted some, I was going to read some, but there's not enough time in this episode that I could even go through them. They are that freaking long. So if you are a writer, and the purpose of writing, and I say this as someone who, was a newspaper reporter at heart, right? The purpose of this is to convey thought. On the other end, as a reader, if you are confused where the hell you are at the end of a sentence and you don't even remember how the sentence began, you can't even process what you are reading to get to the concepts, then you are not an efficient and good writer. I understand why people are pulling out stuff from this book. That, he predicted this, right? He predicted that. What was it called? Experialism, which is kind of the all-in-one entertainment VR system that we have. Folks could be, that's like our smartphones. And that's like, he writes something in here that is pretty much TiVo, which is a technology that we have gotten past already. And so I see that. But however, I'm a Star Trek fan. We were doing that way before it was cool, like in the 1960s. Anybody who's like impressed by that, I get it. But you don't need this book to kind of have that experience of prediction. In fact, I remembered there was this 1993 episode of Northern Exposure, Season 5, Episode 8. It's called Heal Thyself. The character is Chris. He is a David Foster Wallace character.
Oh, my God.
He even wears the bandana type thing.
Oh, my
that's
God.
Chris.
We're on our total blitzkrieg towards isolation.
You think?
Listen to me, the day's coming, and it ain't gonna be long when you ain't even gonna have to leave your living room. No more schools, no more bodegas, no more tabernacles, no more cineplexes, all right? You're gonna snuggle up to your fiber optics, baby, and bliss out.
He basically, in 20 seconds, sums up this over 1,000-page book.
Mm-hmm.
And he does it in 20 seconds.
I want to stop you, Dyer, because I do want to get Will's reaction to what you said, particularly because everyone in this room has the same relationship with language and with writing that you do, Dyer.
Yeah.
You know, Will, Katie, me, we are all in the business of using words and using sentences to convey information
And
in the
before you
clearest,
ask-
most efficient way possible.
Before you ask Will, I just want to issue an apology, Will. I'm sorry that I think my reasons are a little superficial to be like angry about quotation marks, but I admit that. I admit it. I'm sorry, but yes.
That's called readability. That's not
No
that's not
apology
nothing.
necessary.
Will, what's your response to this? You're not in the room with us, but I've never seen Dyer raise his voice before today.
I'm pissing everyone off.
If you put M dashes out there in front of me, I'm going to get angry. I'm sorry.
Hey, I love an M dash. Get out of here.
How can you? I mean, if you're a former newspaper writer, you're guilty of some M dashes in your day.
I didn't say I wasn't a hypocrite.
I think it's very fair to say that David Foster Wallace is at his worst, where he is doing the writing equivalent of jumping a motorcycle over the Grand Canyon, right? He's like, he's like performatively writing. He's showing how smart he is. And this is inseparable from the really dark sides of David Foster Wallace. I think he has alluded in interviews to the fact that this book was, at least in part, an attempt to impress the target of his stalking, the writer Mary Carr. He was, in some ways, jumping a motorcycle over the Grand Canyon with this book for attention, right? And that's sad and dark. But intentionally, accidentally, he struck on some real beauty here. One thing about David Foster Wallace is that he, as a teacher of writing, was known to know and care a lot about grammar. So what does that mean? It means that when he's writing Infinite Jest, he's doing all this stuff on purpose. That makes it even more annoying in some ways. Like, he knows he is tormenting the reader.
We are going to pivot to the chapter you assigned me to read, Will. This is chapter 27. It's called 3 November, the Year of the Depend Adult Undergarment. Lots of chapters are named for the Depend Adult Undergarment. It seems like in this world, that corporation has spent a lot of money sponsoring years. A lot happened that year. I will say I was actually glad that you assigned me this one. And the reason why is this chapter spends a lot of time talking about specific sort of technology, which I think is pronounced video telephony. It's basically like a Zoom meeting. It's phone calls where you can see people. And David Foster Wallace says that people get so carried away with how they look that a whole new market develops where people can buy sort of perfected masks of themselves. And then before the call starts, they put the mask on. And that's what they use during the call. And, you know, so in like office situations or shared workspace situations, it's really strange because sometimes people will grab the wrong mask before the call. And that reminded me of that moment in COVID when an attorney couldn't get the kitten filter off his face during a Zoom court meeting. And so I did find myself in that chapter laughing at some of these ideas. It was really funny, and it was also deeply, deeply depressing because I don't know how anybody could read that chapter having gone through the pandemic we all went through without reflecting on any moment when you were on a Zoom call or a Teams call or something as two-dimensional as that connection with other people was, it was the only thing you had. I mean, Will, we talked a little bit about this chapter and the whole video telephony thing. This is one of those chapters that all kinds of think pieces have been written about. You know, was David Foster Wallace right? Did he herald the beginning of Zoom 30 years before it happened? Blah, blah, blah. What do you think about this?
I don't think that he predicted the technology in advance, or that's even the important part. I think he predicted the more like spiritual aspects of how this technology affects us, right? Like what he's describing in that chapter seems more relevant to like Instagram and TikTok than it does to Zoom, right? It's about the ways that our online selves, when we exist in this virtual space with each other, the online self, the fake self, gets mixed up and sometimes subsumes the real self or drowns out the real self. It becomes more important than the real self, right? And the mask becomes the person. And that part of it rings very, very true, to the point that it's so true that it's a cliche now, right? Like we all acknowledge that Instagram and TikTok and these algorithmic image-based social media platforms have really distorted our sense of ourselves and, I don't know, caused a lot of problems for teenagers, for adults. That part of it rings very, very true.
I agree with that. That notion of the curated self and who we are supposed to be and look like and what we present to the world is something we can spend a lot of time consumed by, to the point that we're sort of not present in where we are right now. There's a lot to talk about here still, but I want to go to a quick lightning round with all of us, because the question that I still want answered is, do you have to read Infinite Jest? This book will not go away. Katie Campbell?
Y'all might have noticed it got a little quiet there at a certain point, and that is because I did not know that this was written to impress a stalking victim and that this was written as part of a campaign of like terror against a woman. If you enjoy this book, if you get some amount of something out of it from like reading it with a book club and picking on it, or if you genuinely take something great away from this book, awesome. I do not want to take that away from anybody, but I am now firmly in the camp that we do not need to read this book anymore. There are so many brilliant, beautiful books out in the world, many of which were not part of a campaign of fear against a woman or anybody, and I think we can just read one of those instead. I can't help but think about authors like Octavia Butler. I find her brand of prescience and the way she approached it so much more engaging. And she did not enjoy the kind of fame and accolades that David Foster Wallace did. And I think she did it better. Works like Yevgeny Zamyatin's We are also kind of addressing a lot of these things without harming anybody. I looked him up real quick to make sure he was cool while we were talking. He was an outspoken dissident of Soviet Russia. He died very poor because he was censored for most of his career. Like, there are brilliant writers out there who have taken on some of these similar ideas and done it not in a way that was harmful to anybody. So yeah, I was gonna say, read it if you want to. It could be fun, but now I'm firmly in the camp of we can let this one go.
Fair enough. Dyer, what do you think? Do you have to read Infinite Jest?
Well, no, nobody has to do anything, but
that's the whole premise of this conversation.
Okay,
just
no.
kidding.
There are much more efficient, entertaining sources of what is in this book elsewhere. They were zooming the Romulans on Star Trek in the 60s. Like, this is not anything new. However, Will makes a really good point about this book. Dave Foster Wallace is more concerned with kind of the philosophical, spiritual aspects of these kinds of technologies. And that's why reading this book, I wrote down Gen X book, because I feel like this is a very Gen X era take on these concepts, technologies, predictions, pop culture. And I feel like that's what was really the conversation, like if you were in a coffee shop in the 1990s talking about this kind of stuff.
Will, do you have to read this book?
No, you don't have to read Infinite Jest, but you do need to read in the spirit that Infinite Jest was written. You do need, I think, to read books that are not entertaining, that are not fun, that do feel like running a marathon or enduring something. Because in a world where we are inundated by attempts to entertain us and addict us with cheap little amusements, our entire economy at this point is based around this, right? Distracting us. Easy, frictionless entertainment that is available all the time. The ultimate act of rebellion is to do things that are a little bit boring, that are a slog, that are type 2 fun, that make you sort of regret it while you're doing it, but feel really satisfying afterwards. I mean, David Foster Wallace, when we talk about the form and the function of Infinite Jest, he's writing about, a lot of the plot of the book is about a product that's so entertaining that it kills people, right? I think that's the world we live in today. And so the book being long and obnoxious and hard to follow, he's making the antidote to that. He's saying, stretch yourself, seek out something other than entertainment. And I think that spirit is part of reading, is an essential part of reading. It's not just about amusement or entertainment. It is about keeping the human soul alive in some way.
Will gave a really good answer. Both of you gave really good answers as well, Dyer and Katie. I have a little confession to make here as I was thinking about this question, do you have to read Infinite Jest? I, almost without realizing it, kept changing the question to, do I have to read Infinite Jest? And the reason I changed it, I've realized, is because I have had a relationship with this book for 30 years since it came out. I went to Illinois State University when David Foster Wallace taught there. He had an outsized presence on our campus. He was writing Infinite Jest during the time that I was at college. This book, for 30 years, has represented what the smartest kids were able to do. And I have asked myself for 30 years if I am smart enough to get through this book. And so I started reading it a few months ago. I am now 51 years old. 51 years old. I have thought about this book for a long time. And in reading it, I realized something. This book is what I thought intellectual conversation was when I was 20.
Yes.
What I thought intellectual conversation was just dudes monologuing at me. Mm-hmm. And at age 51, I don't care anymore. And so the thing that I have come away with from reading Infinite Jest is actually something that the poet and memoirist Mary Karr said. We have talked about her as a stalking victim of David Foster Wallace and an abuse victim of David Foster Wallace. But she has an incredible career as a writer. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that she said in 2018 was, I feel like all my life I have pandered to men in a way that I wasn't aware of. And I have totally changed my mind about what's going on in the world. That really struck me because it caused me to realize intelligence or being smart is not about being an individual actor. It's actually about how you connect with, collaborate with, work with, care for the people who are around you. I mean, that's kind of one of the things that is so frustrating and exhausting about Infinite Jest is every single character in that book is desperately lonely. So if you are going to read Infinite Jest, pick a chapter, particularly from the first third of the book. They're all vignettes. Spend time with that character who I guarantee you will be lonely and will be suffering. And see what that vignette has to say to you about what it means to be human. Will James is a reporter and producer here at KUOW. Thank you so much, Will. Dyer Oxley is our pop culture host for Meet Me Here. Dyer, thank you so much. I now want to watch Northern Exposure again because of you.
I will watch it with you.
Oh, sweet. That's amazing. Katie Campbell is our book bestie and the founder of the KUOW Book Club. Katie, thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and I understand if I'm some people's book enemy now.
We're all book frenemies here.
I had one last thought. You asked the question, Jeannie, like, does anyone have to? And there probably are people who have to, technically, in curriculum.
Yeah, maybe so.
Like, we're arrested by what we call classics, and we haven't, like, updated the classic canon in a really long time. If this is currently in your curriculum, like, maybe think twice. Maybe put a Mary Carr book in there.
Meet Me Here is produced by KUOW, a proud member of the NPR network. It's hosted by Katie Campbell, Dyer Oxley, and me, Jeannie Yandel. And it's produced by Kyle Norris, Brandy Fullwood, and Matt Martin. Phyllis Fletcher is our editor. You can find out more and support the show at kuow.org/meet. And if you're enjoying Meet Me Here, let us know. Rate and review the show wherever you listen. It really helps. If you have an arts and culture event you want to tell us about, email us at arts@kuow.org. That's arts@kuow.org. I'm Jeannie Yandel. See you soon.
Seattle is a boom town. From manufacturing to tech, some of the world's biggest companies have brought jobs and wealth to the region.
But that comes with real growing pains. I'm Joshua McNichols.
And I'm Monica Nicholsberg. We host Booming, a podcast that helps you make sense of the economic forces shaping our lives here in the Pacific Northwest.
From the big budget projects on Seattle's to-do list
to the artificial intelligence age,
we get into the stories that hit your wallet and our region. Listen now on the KUOW app or wherever you get podcasts.